Hello, and welcome to episode 20 and the final episode for season 2 of Triumph Beyond Trauma. I'll be taking a little break for a couple of weeks to hang out with the kiddies before heading into season 3, so please take the opportunity to listen to any past episodes you might have missed, or take the time to leave a 5-star rating, review, or share the podcast to your community. I would deeply appreciate the feedback, and I would love for the algorithm to work in favour of getting these episodes into the ears of those who may need it most. Today, I speak with an absolute legend human, Tiffanee Cook. Tiffanee is a dynamic force in the world of boxing, coaching, podcasting, and speaking, driven by a passion to understand why some people thrive after life's challenges. As a boxer and coach, her experiences shape her insightful approach to personal development. Her podcast is a rich tapestry of narratives where she explores a range of topics from mindset and adversity to neuroscience and resilience. She blends personal stories with scientific research, offering listeners diverse perspectives on human potential and growth. As a certified coach and personal trainer, Tiffanee is dedicated to guiding her clients towards holistic well-being, addressing mental, physical, and emotional health. She helps them unravel the stories and behaviours that limit their potential, advocating for a balanced and fulfilling life. Tiffanee sees life as a grand boxing ring, embracing a philosophy of resilience and adaptability. Her message is clear. Let's embrace life's challenges and roll with the punches. I can't wait for you to listen to this episode, so let's get stuck in. Welcome to Triumph Beyond Trauma, the podcast that explores journeys of resilience and hope. I'm Rosie Skene, a yoga and breathwork teacher and founder of Tactical Yoga Australia. As a former soldier's wife, mum to 3 beautiful kids, and a medically retired New South Wales police officer with PTSD, I understand the challenges of navigating mental health in the first responder and veteran community. Join us for incredible stories from individuals who've confronted the depths of mental illness and discovered their path to happiness and purpose, as well as solo episodes and expert discussions. Together, we'll uncover the tools to help you navigate your journey toward a brighter, more fulfilling life. Whether you're looking for helpful insights, practical tips, or just a friendly reminder that you're not alone, Triumph Beyond Trauma has got your back. You matter, and your journey to a happier, more meaningful life starts right here. Tiff Cook, welcome to Triumph Beyond Trauma. I'm so thrilled to have you here.
So glad to be here, Rosie. How are you?
I'm very, very well, and how are you?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Old, but good.
You are a busy person. You're a boxer, a podcaster, a speaker, a coach, a personal trainer. You're all the things. How do you fit that into your life?
I don't know, mate. Sometimes I ask myself the same question. But what I will say is I feel really fortunate because I've squeezed a little bit of everything in. So it's a really good mix and a good balance for me to have, just a range of things to do. Sometimes I'm in the gym with people. Sometimes I'm on Zoom having conversations with people. Sometimes I'm getting busy with marketing and running a new program. And I just took me a long time to find that balance for me, my version of balance for me.
Yeah. I remember when I first started seeing a psychologist, my very first appointment, she said, Rosie, what you need is balance in your life. And I'm like, yeah, actually, I think I do.
And what even is that? It's
Yeah.
so, psychologist, what does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Tiff, do you want to tell us a little bit about your story and how you've come to be where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, where am I even? So I'm from Tassie originally. I was a young Tassie lass. I grew up in a little country beach town called Turners Beach. It was a little bit like Summer Bay for all of those home and away listeners. And funnily enough, my mum and dad actually closely resemble Alf and Elsa, and we had the shop in Turners Beach.
Oh.
So I reflect back and I'm like, that's really funny and cute.
Yeah.
But I moved over here just before I'd turned 20. So I moved over to Melbourne and decided to chase the big smoke and do the things and be amazing. And worked in kind of the corporate life for all of that time. And then at 29, I raised my hand to do a corporate boxing challenge. 12-week 0 to hero style boxing event, which little did I know at the time, like I thought I was just choosing just another attention seeking kind of what can I do that chicks don't do? what's exhilarating, like, just a bit of a dive in head first to things kind of person that I am. And and it was all of that and a whole lot more. And when I look back now, it was really a catalyst for a lot of change and also a lot of diving deep into realizing who I am and who I'm not
Yeah.
and unpacking a whole bunch of stuff. But after a couple of years of boxing, I quit my job and became a personal trainer. So I started doing a bit of personal training on the side and really loved it and got to a point where I thought, well, I can't do both of these things because I'm too busy. The too busy is a bit of a theme, Rosie, as you can see. I haven't dropped the too busy. I've
No.
just changed how it looks. But I thought I can't I can't keep saying yes to clients and also keep working full time. And I felt like there's so many people that became personal trainers wanting to quit their jobs. And so I felt like I kinda owed it to the opportunity to give it a go. I thought, "Well, I can always go back to work." And I've never looked back. So now I do personal training, and I love teaching people the art of boxing. I've had 14 fights myself under my belt. It's both my I guess, my passion, but also my therapy. Like, it's a real place of I call it like the canvas is like a mirror, the mirror to my soul, like, the one place in my early 30s that showed me it was like the first mirror I looked in that told the truth.
I love that you call it the art of boxing. And then you said that's your therapy and all of those things. That's what we do. Really great for helping us, mentally is to find something that's therapeutic or like art. And that was so nice that you said that about boxing because a lot of people wouldn't think that.
Yeah, well, it's funny because this year, Mark Seymour, who's for anyone that isn't familiar, he was the lead singer of Hunters and Collectors, so he's written some really influential music over the years under that banner for Australian rock music. And this year he released, so I've been training him for the last 2 years after having him on my podcast when I first started the show, and we sparked an interest over boxing. And he's just released an album called The Boxer, and the title track is called The Boxer, and it's written based on the conversations we had, based on kind of what I'd shared with him about my journey and my connection with boxing, and that really grabbed him. And what's been interesting is as he releases that album, understanding how people perceive boxing, uh, relative to actually what the art of it is and what's underneath. And, because it can come across to people like a real brutal sport, like a
Yeah.
violent sport. "Oh, I don't agree with boxing." It's whatever we think it is. I know when I was young in Tassie, a friend was dating a boxer. Her boyfriend boxed and I couldn't watch, right? And now I don't see it the same way I saw it back then. It's really interesting just to understand how we perceive things. So,
Yeah. And just
yeah.
having that extra bit of knowledge of what's actually going on there as well would help with that, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
100%,
Yeah.
like, I just remember kind of that almost shock of seeing myself unfold in front of my own eyes and the stuff that came up over that first couple of years of boxing and going, "Oh," like, I've we're all storytellers, we're reason-making machines, so I'd rolled through life for 3 decades just a little justification factory,
Mm.
justifying my decisions and choices and behaviors in the best light possible, which was great, right? Because I thought I'm independent, I'm strong, I'm decisive, I do this, I'm so brave, I'm so courageous. But that was the flavor I was putting over all of my decisions. But in the boxing ring, you don't have time to justify your behaviors because you have to behave before the conscious mind can come into play. So someone throws a punch at you and the most primal part of you reacts, and you have to watch that play out, and you learn very quickly, "Oh, there's no story to be told here. I can't sit and create a story of how I'm going to react. I'm going to react." And sometimes that reaction is not who I thought I was. And then the beauty about the art of boxing is I then get to change that, and you can't change one thing in one area without it flowing out into your life and changing other areas of your life, in my opinion anyway, if you really deeply can connect with it and make that understanding.
Mm. I've listened to quite a few of your podcasts, and I know that you have anxiety or have had anxiety before. And do you find that boxing really helps you with that and managing any symptomology that you might have?
Yeah, look, I think what boxing did for me was give me emotional literacy. I think you used that term with me the other day, and I like that, like emotional literacy. I don't think that I ever felt. I didn't feel before. Like
Mm.
I wasn't connected to my body. And I think that's why after a couple of years, those first 2 years in boxing, when I started to keep returning to this canvas and stepping into physical discomfort and showing up and letting myself be in it, regardless of how I felt, I actually started to connect with emotion again, and I feel like that's what's made me curious and start seeking and start uncovering that trauma that I had suppressed and tucked into the back of my mind for so many years. So I feel like I never identified as someone. I was saying to someone the other day, the funny thing is about my connection to boxing, and most people have this story of this thing happened, there was this hardship, I was in a bad place, then I found the solution. I didn't identify with that. I identified with someone who had a great life. I found the solution found me before I realized there was something to solve or
Yeah.
something to discover. And so I was embedded in this process, and then the lessons and the self-awareness and the self-realization started to emerge from underneath that. So in answer to your question, I developed this relationship with what is anxiety and how do we manage it and control it. I don't know if I ever identified the first time I fought, the first day of my fight, the anxiety that I felt, which I didn't even use the word anxiety. I remember saying to my mum, I will never in my life do anything like this again because there's nothing in the world that could be worth how I feel right now. And I didn't have words for what that feeling was. Now,
Yeah.
that was massive anxiety. I was debilitated for the day with anxiety. I didn't know what it felt like before. And I probably wouldn't have even called it anxiety on that day because I didn't have words for that.
Yeah.
But it was yuck. And obviously, I did the fight anyway. And what was on the other side of that was so enormous in the most positive way, that feeling that I had on that day that I said I'd never, ever, ever face again for any reason, that was nothing. I was like, that's now a small thing. That doesn't even compare to what was on the other side. So you start to build, and this is why I think even yoga, that you're really passionate about that. I did it last night. Thanks very much. You
Yes.
inspired me to do that. Get yourself on the mat and sit in the feelings and go when you don't want to go and do the thing. And then you start to be able to sit in the middle of the feeling and analyze it and go, what is this? Like, am I anxious right before a fight? Hell yeah, but it's the same symptomology as excitement. I'm there because I want to be there. So we start to understand that, yeah, there's a physiological response in the body, but also that's okay because I have a relationship with that, and I can alter my relationship with that. And when I am able to do that, then the reaction from my body is more I get to manage it. And I
Mm.
think sport and physical training is the playground for exactly that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And what you're saying there with boxing, you have to sit with that being uncomfortable, but then learning that that's only temporary. And that's
Mm.
what I find with yoga too. And a lot of people, excuse me, that I know get that same thing. You learn that things in life are only temporary through these practices, whether it be boxing or yoga or whatever else you choose to do. And that can help to ease a lot of anxious feelings, because you're like, okay, hello, old friend anxiety, or hello, I'm feeling a little bit sad today, but this is only temporary and then something else will happen. And I think that's what you get from these practices, right? And sports.
100%. And one that really stands out in boxing is the idea of how fickle our own perception of our performance is. Now, I remember this one distinct time I was sparring, preparing for a fight and doing a lot of sparring. I was having to spar a girl that was 10 years in the game, and I was quite new at that stage. 10 years in the game, she was probably 3 or 4 weight divisions higher, so she was a bigger build than me, and she'd won titles and all sorts, so she was good, right? She was best in the gym, and I'm sparring with her, and I sat down at the end feeling quite overwhelmed about it all, and I was sitting there, and the coach could obviously tell, and he came over, he goes, what's wrong with you?" And I was like, I just, I was just feeling frustrated because of my perception of how you're trying to manage yourself in an unmanageable environment. I can't control her. I can only control me. And my perception was, I'm just not getting any better at this. Like, I'm really frustrated. And he goes, "Are you for real? That's the best you've ever sparred. And no one has ever put that much pressure on Carly in this gym, ever." And I just looked at him and went, "What a shit sport, eh? Right? I just did the best I've ever done.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here and my interpretation of it is that I've done the worst." So it starts to, that lesson, that happens enough times that the lesson is in your mind that, it doesn't matter what I think. I feel the same on podcasts often, Rosie, and I've done over 800 of them.
Yes,
And
you have.
sometimes in the middle of the conversations, I'm sitting there going, "You're so embarrassingly bad at this today. You're not giving the guest a great experience. You're not getting they're not gonna be enjoying this," all of that narrative. And sometimes I'll edit the episode later and go, "Gee, that was a really great conversation."
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
start to go, well, sometimes what I think doesn't matter in the moments.
Mm. And yeah, but the ability though to go back and have a think about how you're thinking is a whole nother skill set, right? Like
Yes.
that takes a lot of emotional intelligence to be able to actually do that and then take something from that and go, you know what? Those thoughts in that time, they weren't right. That's not what was going on at all. So
Yeah.
it's an act of kindness to yourself to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I
Mm.
know you've had Mark Thomas on before, and once when I've spoken to him, when he talked about just acknowledging that idea that I am not my thought. My
Yes.
thoughts aren't, like, that is not who I am. Because if I am my thoughts, I wouldn't be able to observe them as it's some sort of different entity.
Mm.
So even just the language around how we, in our own minds, how we talk about or to ourselves or observe our own thoughts like that and go, oh, that's like, sometimes I just go, well, it's interesting that I seem to be feeling like this right now. Oh, that's interesting. It's like, oh, like just getting curious about stuff rather than letting it become me.
Mm. I find something like I don't do it much anymore. I'm much kinder to myself now, but I would in my head say things about myself that I would never say about anyone ever. Even if they were the worst person I'd ever met, I would never talk to a person the way I spoke to myself. Isn't it crazy? Like just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
yeah. Mm.
I the other day I was in the gym training a friend who's now a client, and we stand in front of the mirrors and I'm teaching her technique. And so I'm showing her how to shadow box and how to do these movements. And I look into the mirror, as I always do, but I go and I say it out loud. I'm like, "Oh, like, look at the bags under my eyes." And I start just kind of mumbling and laughing, like in a joke, and we're laughing about that. And she's doing this shadow box, and then she goes, "Hang on." She goes, "Hey, is that inner dialogue just coming right out?" And I'm like, and I laugh. I go, "Yeah, actually it is." She goes, "'Cause as she hears me start talking, she thinks that I'm saying, oh, like, look at that." And she's paying all this attention to, like, she can't see the bags on my face. She's looking at this amazing technique she's learning and how smooth I make it look. And she's soaking that up. And then this lag in conversation catches up and she's like, "Hang on a minute." And I'm like, yeah. Yeah, like that. I was letting myself do that in the moment, and that is not nice. Like, I
Mm.
wouldn't do that to a person.
Mm. Yeah, you're not saying to her, look at the bags under your eyes. Like,
It's like we're both standing under a light that puts shadows under our eyeballs. Like, we both have a shadow under our eyeballs right now, but I'm berating myself for it and not her.
mm. Yeah, we can be the most horrible person to ourselves. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Something I saw actually on your website is the quote, maybe you already have everything you need to be happy. And you've got a couple of great quotes on your website, but I particularly really liked this one because I think we can all get so carried away with wanting the next thing that we cannot sit and be content in what we have right now. And, when you talk to people, like even friends and family, how are you going? Oh, yeah, pretty good. But, this is happening, or, I can't wait for Friday. I can't wait for this. And when I get this, things will be better. But I think as humans, we just have this urge to always be wanting more, and no one's really sitting in what we have right now. And that just, I love that so much because it's something that I've really worked on over the last 5 years, especially is contentment and not
Mm.
always waiting. Like, yes, it's great to have goals and things that you want in life to achieve or do, but being able to just say, okay, well, this is good right now, and I have everything that I could need. Where did that come from for you?
I think it's curiosity, right? Because I hang out with people that have, I've people's energy plays a big role on how I am, think, and behave, and I always notice it in times. I always kind of take stock, whether it be times when I'm not feeling great, and I'll be like, okay, who am I spending time with? What are their attributes? What are our conversations like? And then times when I'm doing really well, I'm like, who's around me? Who's whose energy am I feeding off? And it's always reflected. But also it's that realizing, especially in things like business or networking, it's who am I around and who am I aligned with? What's my perception of where they're at? And what's their perception? And it's really interesting sometimes realizing that I'm looking up to people, and then I peek in and they're a version of me, and I'm going, but you're doing doing this, achieving this. Like, my perception of where you're at is where I want to be, and your perception of where you're at is where I feel like I am. And then I go, well, hang on, I'm a version of that on, because there's someone else on a level looking at me going, gee, I'd love to be there. And I'm like, because we like to point the finger. Oh,
Mm,
that person.
yeah.
They've got all of the things and they're not happy, but I'm well aware that I am a version of that, right? I went to what was it, eating out the other night, and I went to the bathroom, and I had to go out to the back courtyard, and their bathroom was a kind of outdoors, so there's the outdoor courtyard and then the bathroom in there, and it's freezing in Melbourne right now. And as I was in the bathroom, it was so icy cold, and for some reason, I guess because it was outdoors, I just thought to myself, people there are homeless people are sleeping in this cold, like, because I just saw that dark little, I was like, it's outdoors. Wonder if people just hide away in here.
Mm,
And then I just thought, God, it is so cold for the people that don't have homes right now. And I got a home and I got heaters and I've been whinging about power bills, but I have the choice, right? It's not that I can't afford to run them. It's that I have a choice of whether I want to spend that much money to heat my house. And that's really fortunate, you know? And I don't think we always, I just see that play out at all of the different levels. And I want to be careful that, that I'm taking stock and really being happy. I think about, I remember once just strolling around Elwood in a daydream, thinking about this and wondering if we focus on being happy, that whole idea of positive affirmations, or, like just our thoughts, managing our thoughts in our mind. And we just decided to be happy rather than chase the circumstances with the expectation that
mhm.
when I make this much money and can buy this and do this and have this, then I'll be happy. Because whether we say it or not, that seems to be the idea that we adopt.
Mm,
But if I could work on the being happy now, I'd be at the end game. But then I wonder to myself, if we did that with people, so we got this range of people, would people, once you got happy, would you end up at the goals that you say you need to have to be happy? Or would you lose the drive to be it? Or would it matter in the end? If you had the happiness, would it matter? Would you naturally get the goals easier? Like we say, that you got to be happy to do things in order to get somewhere.
yeah.
I'm totally not articulating it well,
So
but you're
deep.
with me. You're
Yeah,
with
I'm with
me.
you. I'm with you.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's like I think of that. I go, well, yeah, it's interesting. I've been doing a lot of, not a lot, once a week. Just recently started going and doing Buddhist meditation, and I love that. They just kind of brain dump philosophies that float around in your head, and it's interesting because there's nothing to do with them. The first night I went, as my busy little me that's usually punching faces and running and doing all the things and thinking, I was like, you know what, I need a bit of meditation, and we go in and it's both very simple but incredibly complex, the philosophies they speak of. And I sat there in the room looking around thinking what level people are at and how they're interpreting it. And the main thing that stood out was they're not everyone in this day and age, and that's probably me just speaking on behalf of people I shouldn't. It feels like we all want the solution. I want to go to a Buddhism class to learn what I have to do in order to be happy or in order to stop doing, right? Because that's essentially what I'm going for. I'm going to stop doing. But it's like, what do I have to do to stop doing? And there's everything they spoke of. There was nothing to do. There was no decision you had to make. There were just these things that were said that then, for me, it just felt like they will sit in my mind and they will shift how I view the world if and when it needs to. I don't need to do anything with it. I don't need to change my mind about anything. It's just this thing that I now contemplate, not even consciously, I don't think.
Mm. And I think with things like, those sort of practices and those philosophies, they do sit with you, don't they? They just like little files on the computer, like just in the back of your mind, and then something will spark that philosophy again.
Yeah.
It could be a couple of days, weeks, months, years, doesn't matter. Maybe like have that thought and then think about that philosophy and go, right, okay, yeah, this is how it is in my life, or this is how I'm perceiving that. It's actually really incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, what does it even mean? And you go, I don't know. What does it need to mean? Well, I don't know. We'll see.
And having these internal conversations.
So much chatter. So much chatter, Rosie.
Oh, it makes me laugh so much. You are the host of the Roll with the Punches podcast, and you have got more than 800 episodes in a very, very short time. It blows my mind how many episodes you've done. Is it only 4 years?
It's only 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah. You must be a mad woman. Like,
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
or you just really love a chat.
I do really love a chat. I started it because we were thrust into COVID.
Yeah.
I had gyms. They obviously, the pause button got hit on that. And my thoughts were, this could be it for me. Like, we're not making money out of those gyms yet. My business partners, when I chose to go into that, I was going in with 3 business partners. They were all very financially A-okay. And I felt like so the question I asked at that initial time was, hey, if this goes bad, just a little blip on the radar for them, but for you, it's a complete wipe your canvas completely clean. Like this, if this doesn't go well, it's you lose everything, you start again, you don't have a big support base. Will you accept that you will learn enough or change enough to, if that happens? Because it's likely, right? It's a likely scenario that we don't like to acknowledge when we go into business. And so when COVID hit, I remember sitting in the front yard and just going, cool, well, this is it. You've answered the question, so you can't complain about it. You asked yourself the question and you answered it, and you said it's okay. Wasn't supposed to be a pandemic, but that's what it is right now. Maybe you'll lose everything, so how about you just pretend that you have, so you can make amends with that, right? Just pretend it's bankruptcy. That's it. That's your slate. And so I decided whatever I spent my time on was going to be something that I couldn't lose financially. And that came down to building a brand and an audience and a skill set. And I always loved speaking and networking. So it was building a network, connecting with great people, working on what was essentially communication skills. And within 3 months, I just was blown away. I felt like I'd been to university. I was like, I've never learned in a way that I've learned by having these types of conversations. And it literally changed me and the world that I live in. Like, I'm not the same person and the world is not the same place because I get to borrow 800 different perspectives and counting
Mm.
for an hour at a time and contemplate and hear and learn, and just like Buddhism, it sits in your mind and all of a sudden you're different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
It's so cool. It's so cool. I love it so much, you know. This is episode 20 for me, and I feel exactly the same after just a few episodes. I've learned so much. And you mentioned Mark Thomas. He is an amazing man with the Code 9 Foundation, and I know that you're an ambassador for them as well. How did that come about?
That was the podcast. He reached out to me in the really early days. When I started the podcast, I was working online with Ambulance Victoria paramedics. And in the program that I had set them, I was training them 4 days a week. And on the 5th day, I decided to do I called it Feel Good Friday. And the idea was initially just a get together, you know, a point of connection for those who didn't want some psychopath screaming burpees down the down the Zoom camera. So it started out as that. Very quickly, I started getting people to join me to give some value, some speakers, aromatherapy, talking about emotions, talking about people who've been through hard stuff. Then that sparked really, I looked at the lineup of speakers I'd given them and went, like, that's thousands of dollars worth of speakers, and these are just people in my network. So I went, oh, and because I had that brand affiliation, it gave me the confidence to reach out to networks that I probably wouldn't have when I could say, hey, could you have a conversation with us for Ambulance Victoria paramedics? So that was really the beginning of, I was borrowing a bit of confidence from that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's planted the seed. So because of the episodes I was doing with first responders, Mark saw that through the networks he was in and reached out and said, we love what you're doing, would love. So yeah, and that here we are 4 years later, they're legends. We
Yeah.
continue to have lots of conversations and he's doing great stuff.
Yeah, they are doing great stuff, and such a good organization to be associated with, for sure.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I think, look, I'm interested in you and what you're doing. And I guess what out of the 20 episodes you've done on your show so far, now I'm turning it around.
Yeah, you are.
But I like to compare, like, what, because I remember, you know, like I remember distinctly how I felt, but I can't remember the lessons I learned or what I expected or didn't expect.
Mm.
What's been for you like, what's something through podcasting or the conversations or that you've learned that you didn't expect from this?
I just something this is something that I was hoping, but I have come to realize that it is a thing, is that the power that listening to people or having conversations with people, the power that words can have. And you can make a post on Instagram or Facebook, but that's forgotten in about 2 seconds. I think someone was telling me our attention has gone down to seconds, like singular seconds now, like 7 seconds, I think, is our attention span. But something like podcasting, you've got someone for 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, listening to things that other people have to say.
Yeah.
And in this space that I'm trying, like inserting myself in the first responder and veteran mental health space, that's a long time. And for people to get a little bit of hope that things aren't always going to be as bad as they are now if they're having a rough time, that's something that I hoped would transfer across to people. And now 20 episodes is not a lot, but I'm getting people now just cold emailing me or sending me messages on Instagram saying, thank you so much, because now I can understand better what my partner's going through. Or I had Sarah O'Brien, she's the wife of a ex-New South Wales Police and New South Wales Fire and Rescue fireman, and her husband has PTSD, and she came on just to discuss what living alongside that looks like for her and her family and her children and the decisions that she's had to make in the last few years. And then so there's partners now that feel seen for the very first time. So I felt like this would be a powerful sort of platform to share stories, and that has been the case. So I think for me, that's what I've gotten out of it, and that's the biggest thing that I could ever hope for. And to do it in such a short time is amazing, and I really look forward to what's coming next.
Yeah.
And what people are going to get out of the future conversations that I can have with people as well.
I think most podcasts don't reach over 3 or 4 episodes. Very few, but I can't remember the percentages now. So like you're already in the minority. of
Yeah.
those who keep going. And the ones who keep going are the ones who realise this stuff that we get out of it that's not the bells and whistles, like that you keep doing the work and doing the thing, and there's all of this stuff evolving beneath the surface. And I love that.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
What about for you? Like, have you got a favorite episode or something out of the 800? Have you got some
Oh,
that stick out for you?
I mean, I feel like I've got it. Well, actually, there was one that I had on late last year, a guy by the name of Stephen Jenkinson, and he is a philosopher and a theologian from Canada. And I don't know how I stumbled across him, but he talks about death and dying. He wrote a book called Die Well, I think, Die Well or Die Wise, one of the two, Die Wise. And I spoke to him and I had the most deepest, most philosophical conversation. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I couldn't have clung to that conversation years ago. And I wondered if it was going to land with listeners or if it was just me in the space I was in. And I listened to it probably 7 or 8 times since, but I had people reach out and say, "I've listened to that several times." It was just so that really grabbed me because he has he's a real wordsmith. He has this way with words, and it's quite poetic, but he also just leaves things hanging. Like he'll say things, like pose a question or talk death, life, existence, all of this stuff, and then it's like he can move. He just leaves it hanging, and it's kind of a bit like Buddhism. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, what, oh, and then it just hangs in the air there, and you're like, wow, wow, what just happened? He actually came to Melbourne 3 weeks after I'd interviewed him, and he was sold out, but he gave me a ticket to his show. I've never seen anything like it, just in Fitzroy, and it was him and his mate, and the mate sung songs. So he did this weird spoken word thing, like just spoken word. So he talked. He would just talk, and then his mate would sing this song that was kind of relative, and it was the most powerful thing. I sat there just watching in like my jaw on the floor going, this, what even is, I've never been exposed to something like this. And he's got quite a cohort of followers here in Australia, but also most people don't know who he is. They're like, who's, it was amazing. So
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I do have a favourite.
I'll have to take a listen to that one. I haven't listened to that one yet.
Yeah, very cool, very deep, I'd love to hear what you think after you do.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Tiff, I know you've got to run, and that's my fault that this is a little bit shorter than normal. I'm so sorry. But have you got a piece of advice for someone that might be listening that might be having a tough time or a rough day, something that can help them see that there is a little bit of hope?
Yeah, look, I think I'm a real stickler for getting it out, like speaking or moving towards speaking, and so whether that be writing or speaking it in private. But I know that 68 episodes in was the first time I spoke of my trauma in kind of in public, and I'd spent quite a few years having therapy and in my mind dealing and thinking that I'd dealt with things at a certain level. And when I say in that episode, I literally was asked the question of what I was kind of maybe referencing, and I said, I years of sexual abuse as a child, and that was the kind of, "Oh, have you ever said that before?" And I said, "No, not publicly." And this was with Craig Harper, who I work with now, and he said, "Well, we love you, and you're doing great." And we had a 2-minute talk, and then we went on with the podcast. The next day, I remember thinking, "Whoa, I didn't realize how heavy that was. That's just lifted. I feel light." Like, and I thought, so sometimes I think the power of speaking or moving towards speaking, even when we think we don't need to or we think we've dealt with things. So, yeah, I say write, journal, talk, sing, do something that starts to give you the ease to be able to say words.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tiff, for sharing that. That's, yeah. You don't know the weight of things until you're able to let them go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Tiff, thank you for joining me today. It's been great. And I hope maybe one day you can come back and we can have an even longer conversation.
For sure.
Um,
You're great.
But I will link to your podcast in the show notes because I think people should really take a listen if they don't already, because it's amazing. And I really want to thank you for coming on. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you have, make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss any new ones. We release fresh content every Tuesday. And while you're there, take a moment to leave us a review. I would genuinely appreciate your thoughts. Don't forget to connect with me on Instagram and Facebook at Tactical Yoga Australia and share this episode with your friends, family and workmates to spread inspiration. Your support means the world. My name is Rosie Skene. Join me again next week for another empowering and positive episode of Triumph Beyond Trauma. Until then, be kind to your mind and trust in the magic of your consistent and positive efforts. Triumph beyond your trauma is closer than you think. Have the best week.